You can start, sir.
Well, good evening, everyone. In fact, namaste, everyone. On behalf of Intas Pharmaceutical Limited, I, Dr. Dikshit Patel from Medical Affairs, welcome you all to this live webinar program. We know that currently entire medical fraternity is navigating through the uncertain time, trying to understand and solve the puzzle of the COVID-19. And COVID-19 had impacted the clinical practice of all the specialty, including the gastroenterology also. And it is also critical to understand the impact of COVID-19 in or on the GI practice in a simplified manner when we are surrounded by the mountains of the information related to the COVID-19. So today, to simplify our understanding on the GI endoscopy practice in this COVID era, we have with us Dr. Amol Bape as well as Dr. Anjali. And Dr. Anjali is going to moderate the entire session. We will have the question answer session at the end of the presentation. And for that, I request all the attending clinicians to post their question even during the presentation time also in the comment box, which is seen right side of your screen. And Dr. Amol and Dr. Anjali will take this question at the end of the presentation. So with this, I would like to invite Dr. Anjali on our virtual podium, and I'll briefly introduce madam that the Dr. Anjali madam is practicing surgeon and endoscopist at Nanded since last 20 years. She is executive committee member of Maharashtra Surgeon Association since last 5 years, and she is very active into the academics. So now I hand over the virtual podium to Dr. Anjali madam. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dikshit. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, welcome all. On this pandemic COVID-19, I welcome on behalf of ENTAS, Dr. Amol Bape, who is our speaker today. Now, to introduce Dr. Amol Bape, he is a renowned gastroenterologist practicing at Pune. He is basically a surgeon, a proud son of a proud surgeon. On this occasion, now Sir has multiple credentials into academics as a surgeon, as a practicing endoscopist. But in this forum, I would like to share that Dr. Amol Bape has many social services to his credit, and out of that, a non-profit organization which he runs, that is free, that is a foundation for research education of endoscopy training. That is a non-profit organization which is run by Dr. Amol Bape, and he was a brand ambassador in 2015 by the American Gastroenterological Society, and many credits goes to him. Now on this forum, it is incomplete if I do not mention the name of his father, Dr. M.Y. Bape, who is the senior surgeon from Pune. And to mention, Dr. M.Y. Bape was a founder secretary of the Massicon event, which is a Maharashtra state chapter conference and which is a very prestigious conference. Now on this forum, many of our Maharashtra surgeons have logged in, and our president of Maharashtra Association, Dr. Rajendra Shinde, Dr. Satish Dharap, and many must have logged in into this event. So he was the founder secretary, and now this is almost a 42nd event of the Massicon, which is hosted by the Pune Surgical Society in the coming year. So I welcome you, Dr. Amol Bape, on this forum. Now, before we begin, I request Dr. Amol Bape, sir, that now we have logged in into this activity various general surgeons, those who are doing endoscopy practice, many anesthetists who want to know that how they should practice in this COVID-19 era, many postgraduate students who are interested that what is this endoscopy practice, is it safe for the future? So with this intention and my multiple Maharashtra State Chapter Association of Surgeons, my teacher, so Dr. Amol Bape, I request you to give us a practical presentation. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Anjali, and thank you, Intas, for this invitation and opportunity to share my thoughts. And thank you, Dr. Anjali, for inviting me at this web meeting. And I bring you greetings from Pune. And at the same time, I would also like to thank everybody for joining in for this webinar. We all know that because of COVID-19, we are all in a state of shock, as well as we need to continue our daily activities at the same time, provide care to our patients. And it is really heartening to see that despite all the challenges that we as a medical professionals are facing, I think finally we will be able to achieve we will be able to conquer this pandemic that has occurred globally. Thank you, Dr. Anjali, for introducing me as son of Dr. M.Y. Bape. I am privileged and proud for that honor that has been bestowed onto me. And yes, definitely, Dr. Bape, my father was the founder secretary of the Masikon movement. And we look forward to hopefully inviting you, welcoming you, all of you all, to Pune for Masikon 2021.
Thank you.
So with that, I would like to, start my presentation, and let us go quickly over some of the points that I would like to share. So what I'm trying to do is going to try and do in the next few minutes is going to be to try and simplify the guidelines. So we know that the disease is called COVID-19, but the virus is the new coronavirus or the SARS-CoV-2. And the global impact, this was about 3 days ago, nearly 3 million. Today it has crossed 3 million. And India has crossed almost 28,000, and Maharashtra has crossed 8,000. So it is definitely a challenge. So when we talk about COVID-19 in the context of healthcare workers, what are the potential risks? So we all know currently that the healthcare workers' risks are definitely high, as described by the WHO, as well as the Chinese data that we got about 2 months ago. And the rate of infection is 3 times higher than that of the general population. And what is important is this recent study, which was published last week from the UK and NHS workers, where they found that the healthcare workers in non-critical areas were more at risk. That means that healthcare workers working in the ICU or in the emergency departments developed COVID symptoms less often, but healthcare workers in non-critical areas like OT or wards developed these symptoms more often, possibly because a little bit of a relaxed attitude, and that is the reason we need to see what should be done. So the issues are, our patient comes to us with his primary disease, but during the course of the treatment, there is a risk of the patient transmitting COVID infection to either one of us or from another patient. So some points that I have included is how do we conduct the OPD services, indoor ICU, as well as the endoscopy services. I will go through the first three in quick succession. So majority of our consultations should be tele or video consultations, and physical consultations should be at the minimum, and all patients should be the COVID consent should be taken, because patients should not later on complain that they developed COVID because they attended your OPD. Now, a lot of video platforms and audio platforms are available. We can use whatever we choose, but some principles, when we are talking to the patient on phone or on video, we do not have the previous records to review. So it is better that we ask the patients to send the records either by email or WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is an easy way of communication today. Nearly 3 to 4 crore people in India are using WhatsApp. The other thing is patients keep calling up at any time during the day. So best is that you schedule the consultations like you would consult, during your consulting hours. So give them 5 or 10 minute slots or 15-minute slots and tell them to call in during that time. Also, another thing to remember is Prescriptions should only be written or printed and sent by email or WhatsApp, and no verbal prescription should be given, because while taking down, writing it down, patients can make spelling mistakes and that can have disastrous complications. So this is a platform which I have created for my clinic. This is just an example, but what we ask the patient to do is call in and send reports the day prior, and then we give the patient a slot to have the telephonic consultation. And after the consultation, we ask the patients to you send this prescription, and you can of course charge the patient also, because let us remember that this is not going to be for a short duration. We are definitely going to be constrained for physical consultations for at least the next 3 to 6 months. We are quite sure of that. And so you can definitely put whatever your charge that you feel appropriate for the consultation. And of course, at the end of the telephonic consultation, if you require the patient to be seen, you can call them. But because of this, we can reduce the number of patients that will be in your waiting area. So social distancing can be better practice. And make sure that the COVID history is taken at the entry point. And if the patient is running fever or something, then do not accept these patients. Another important point is minimize the physical examination. We all know that 99% of the diagnosis can be made on history alone. So minimize physical examination and avoid auscultation as far as possible. And other points like stationery to be kept in the room itself, do not carry home and back. And of course, we all know about the masks and everything. So I will not, continue, waste time in that. But importance of mask is again highlighted in this point, that if both the people are wearing the mask, appropriate mask, the transmission possibility reduces from 70% to 1.5%. So that is important. Now, which mask to use? A surgical mask is good enough because it protects you 95% of the time, as much as an N95 mask does. So in the OPD, no requirement for an N95 mask, unless you are a physician and you are treating, you are likely to counter these patients, patients are going to cough on you. Indoor patients, whom do we admit? So we have to definitely make sure that we admit as less as possible, because the minute we admit these patients, our liability increases. Patients also have a lot of logistics regarding hospitalization and everything. So minimize your admissions and only admit after the total treatment plan has been decided. So if the patient needs a surgical procedure or an endoscopic procedure, admit just that day in the morning or the day prior. Rounds and everything, we have to follow the PP. We will have a discussion on PP anyways. But all those who are following Code Blue principles in your hospitals, it is also important to understand that the Code Blue has changed during COVID. So only nasal oxygen and defibrillation, use of a defibrillator are now permitted. Intubation or even mask ventilation is not permitted in the ward area for Code Blue. That should be done only in the ICU settings. That is what is important. In the ICU, all these points are important, but what is important is which patients to do an endoscopy on. Very often we get calls saying that some patient has a GI bleed, but when we go and see, it may only be a little bit of coffee ground vomitus in a patient with a pneumonia. Now, really speaking, there may be no urgent indication to do an endoscopy in this patient. This patient can be put on a PPI infusion for 12 to 24 hours, and then the need can be reassessed rather than rushing into an endoscopy at that point in time. Coming to endoscopy services, we can divide this into pre-endoscopy, during endoscopy, and post. We know from the SARS experience that up to 5% physicians, 4% nurses, but our endoscopy technicians with 8% are at the highest risk. And virus not only resides in the oral cavity, but it also sheds into the stool. So colonoscopy is an equally high risk procedure. So another important point is that biopsies can also contain, the biopsy samples can also contain the virus, and therefore they have to be handled with care. Ideally, a negative pressure room is preferable, but most of us do not have that facility. So a well-ventilated room is important. And then other things we will take up as we go along. Now, endoscopy is an aerosol generating procedure, particularly the upper GI endoscopies, because of proximity between the patient and the endoscopist and the staff, particularly gastroscopy, ERCP, enteroscopy, as well as manometry and breath tests. They are also aerosol generating procedures. When does aerosolization occur? Insertion of the scope into the pharynx, and as well as when we are putting instruments through the channel, through the biopsy channel. So putting in a biopsy forceps and pulling it out, that generates aerosol. So that there also we have to be very careful about. And as I mentioned, colonoscopy does not technically generate an aerosol, but because the stool may contain virus, care has to be taken. So this is the classification of endoscopic procedures based on which we are going to decide which patients we should offer procedure and which patients we should not. Now, this was formed on the basis of several guidelines, and this is the Asia Pacific guidelines, which were also adapted by the Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy of India, as well as the Indian Society of Gastroenterology. And this shows that we have to classify endoscopy into urgent, semi-urgent, and then elective endoscopy. And what is urgent endoscopy? Patients with acute GI bleeding, which is causing shock or hemodynamic instability. Management of perforation or leak, like a biliary leak, post-cholecystectomy bile leak, who requires an ERCP. Of course, it needs to be done. Patient with a cholangitis, of course, that ERCP and stenting has to be done. A patient with a foreign body in the esophagus with total dysphagia or a battery button cell, of course, it needs to be done. A GI obstruction, a patient with CI esophagus or a CI gastric cancer who cannot retain any food or has total dysphagia requires a stenting, at least a nasogastric tube, if not stenting. So GI access, a patient with a neurotrauma who requires a peg feeding or a jejunal feeding, that requires to be done immediately. The other indications like endoscopic, a patient has a Barrett's esophagus and other things which may be pre-malignant conditions. So these are semi-urgent. The patient doesn't require the procedure tomorrow, but probably yes, he requires a procedure within the next few weeks. So patients with high risk of cancer or occult GI bleeding or ERCP and other conditions with patient has some jaundice, bilirubin of 4 or 5, but no cholangitis, suspected CA pancreas, we could hold on for another 2 or 4 weeks before we can do the ERCP on this patient. At the same time, elective procedures which should be deferred would be all routine diagnostic endoscopy like non-ulcer dyspepsia, reflux, irritable bowel syndrome. All surveillance and follow-up endoscopy should be withheld, and all other ERCPs like chronic pancreatitis and stent removals and other things should definitely be withheld at the current moment of time. So when a patient comes to us for an endoscopy and when we are screening these patients, how do we screen these patients? So this is the standard screening that we perform. That stratification is performed on the basis of these 5 factors: history of fever, travel history, which is becoming less and less relevant now, occupation, particularly a healthcare worker, high risk population, a policeman, high risk population, whether the patient is coming from a cluster area or whether patient has a contact with a COVID positive patient. Currently, there is very limited data and there is still a lot of ambiguity about whether COVID testing should be routinely performed or not. In Pune, currently, routine COVID testing is still not available at most places, including Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, because we believe that universal precautions should be taken for every patient. So we consider these patients as high risk or intermediate risk. And in these patients, only an urgent endoscopy should be performed with PPE donning. That has to be important. And why is this stratification important? There are some advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages are that we may miss out on asymptomatic carriers and which may increase the inadvertent risk. But the advantages is increased treatment, we can cause, and PPE availability can be stratified and scheduling and everything can be better done. So triaging is not foolproof. We have to use all precautions regardless, but at the same time, in future, it might become even more relevant. So which patients to do? We currently, in the current scheme of things, the way the pandemic is holding on in India, we can only do urgent and semi-urgent procedures. We cannot do any elective procedures. This is only for later. So how do we screen our patients? Based on history of fever, respiratory symptoms, as well as the FTOCC screening, and a body temperature is taken and a risk stratification is made. Investigations include a mandatory blood count. If it shows lymphopenia, then that is a pointer towards COVID. And definitely a chest X-ray should be done for all patients. Both these tests are easily available and do not cost too much to the patient. And these two should be routinely performed for every patient who is scheduled even for a gastroscopy. Some people also advocate a chest CT scan, which I do not believe should be done on a routine basis. And COVID testing, we will discuss in the subsequent slide. We need to remember that COVID testing is not foolproof. There is a window period, and because of that, we may miss out on some asymptomatic carriers if they are tested too much early. So there is no role of routine testing. Even in the US, not all hospitals are doing routine testing. The only role it may have is later on when we start doing our elective patients, there we might want to do their COVID testing before we schedule them for a routine procedure. Now, how do we stratify these patients and what PPE do we use? So a mandatory PPE will require an N95 mask and a face shield or goggles for both minimum PPE as well as the high-risk patients. The gown changes. This is a level 1 gown, as well as in a high-risk patient, a level 3 gown should be used. And here, in fact, foot guard have not been showed, but leg guards are mandatory for all our people as well. Now, one point about level 1 and level 3 gowns that I would like to make. A level 1 gown is what we normally get in our Z kit, the HIV kit. Now, the level 1 gown can be enhanced by adding a plastic apron on top of this gown. And that is adequate. That can be created into a level 3 gown. The reason why I'm telling you this is getting PPEs sometimes becomes a challenge, and PPE companies are minting millions out of it, and they're extracting it out of our patients. So let us not, misuse those PPEs. That is very important. Now, donning and doffing, I'm sure most of you all have seen a lot about this. The process is more important, and everybody has to be very familiar with the process. So I will just go ahead with this slide. Now, this is our Dinanath layout, which I would just like to show you for a moment. Of course, this is just as a representation, and people who are working in smaller clinics and nursing homes, the principles have to be followed when we are using these principles. So we operate normally out of 6 procedure rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have closed our 4 procedure rooms because we are not doing that many numbers currently. So only 2 procedure rooms, and the 2 largest rooms we have opened up, so that social distancing even within the room is well managed. And then what we are doing is the donning and doffing. We have a conference room over here, which we normally use for meetings and other things, but that is not being used. So that area we have used for donning. And this is a washing area for the endoscopes and everywhere. So the doffing area is over here itself. So, once the procedure is performed, the endoscopy staff can come out. They can go into this area, doff over here, and then the washroom is over here. So cleaning and everything happens in this direction itself, so that the person does not have to cross again. Also, patient's transfer is very important. So there is an access control room over here, door over here. So this is our recovery, and patients who come into the recovery staff is separate. This staff will drop the patient to the door. The inside staff will take the patient from here into the procedure room, finish the procedure, and then drop off the patient again till this door. And the recovery staff will take the patient forward over there. So that is very important. Exchanging staff and everything is very important. Now we need to minimize the number of individuals inside the procedure room, and at 1 or 2 people in addition to the endoscopist is more than adequate. More people should not be allowed in the procedure room. Now, all the procedure room personnel must practice and learn the donning and doffing techniques very carefully. The N95 is mandatory, and no personal belongings, particularly mobile phones. All procedures should be performed under propofol sedation, and intubation should be avoided because that increases the risk to the anesthetist. Why we advise propofol sedation is without propofol, if we are doing it only with a throat spray, spray should not be used, but a throat local anesthesia also, patient can gag and cough. So to reduce this, propofol is much better. And in case the patient needs to be intubated because there is a patient is in shock or something, the rest of the endoscopy staff should remain outside. Only the anesthesia team should be inside. Viral filter is mandatory if the intubation is being performed. Now, this is a very important video. This is a customized box that our anesthetists in Dinanath have created. You can probably, if anybody is interested, they can get in touch with them or through me. What they have done is, this is a plastic box. There are 2 holes over here for the anesthetist's hands and 1 hole on the side for the assistant. And although this does not completely eliminate the aerosolization, it reduces direct contact and definitely gives a lot of protection to the anesthetist. So that is very important. And this is how we perform all our endoscopies currently in our endoscopy department. So everybody is donned with PPEs, and then we do the procedures. Some other important points regarding the procedure room: avoid switching of personnel within the room during the procedure, and there should be one team for smaller hospitals, smaller units. Try and schedule 2 or 3 procedures on one day. You can utilize your PPE much better. You can distribute the costs over 2 or 3 patients rather than only one, and do the procedures one after the other, and the entire team remains together for the entire time. We do not allow any trainees to perform procedures at the current moment in the department, because the procedure should be finished off as quickly as possible. Other additional points is, when we are typing reports, make sure we are all going to be wearing double gloves. So remove your outer gloves, then type the report. Stationery should be retained in the room, and patient file also should not be brought inside. Only minimum necessary papers should be brought. Patient should also have a mask, and after the procedure, replace the mask for the patient. Surgical mask is not expensive, and it is going to protect all our staff in the recovery as well as everywhere. And no crowding should be allowed. Now, coming to the disinfection practices, the disinfection policy remains the same. Only thing is, we have to ensure that it is followed very rigorously. It should be started only after the patient and the team is out of the room, and the attendant who's performing the cleaning should have full PPE. Suction tubings, anesthesia tubings should be cleaned, and hypochlorite solution should be used for cleaning. And particularly bedside tables, rails, and the furniture and the floor should be disinfected after every procedure. And if we are suspecting, if there is a suspected patient, should be taken last. What about reuse of PPE? Currently, it is not recommended as a standard, but we all know that resource constraint can occur. It has happened in Europe as well as USA. So extended use of N95 masks using the AIMS protocol, where every 5th day the mask can be reused. I think most of us must have received this video on WhatsApp, so I will not repeat it. And face shields can be very easily cleaned. So those should be cleanable. Face shields can be done, but other components of PPE should not be reused. Using a surgical mask over the N95 extends the life of the N95 masks. And what techniques do we use? We can either use just air dry, or if we really want sterilization, then a plasma sterilization should be used. ETO sterilization is not recommended because you are going to be wearing the mask, and ETO gas is poisonous, so it should not be used. In a high-risk patient, what do we do? Last case of the day, as I mentioned, negative pressure room is an ideal situation, but most of us don't have it. What is important to understand is the virus can remain viable in the aerosol for up to 3 hours. So if we are not doing the case as the last case of the day, you need to give a minimum gap of 3 to 4 hours until before the next case is taken up. In the recovery area, social distancing is important, and surgical masks should be provided to all patients. and maintain the hold only for ward patients. ICU patients should not be shifted. And the next patient should be taken only after all the cleaning protocols are completed. Now, the disinfection processing, to reinforce on this, let us not compromise on cleaning, because that is the most important point. Most coronaviruses are inactivated by common disinfectant. So we don't need anything special, but we need to use it more judiciously. So the disinfection protocol for scopes is detergent solution for 3 to 5 minutes, then alcohol flushing through all the channels for 3 to 5 minutes, and then glutaraldehyde solution for 20 to 30 minutes. An automatic reprocessor in the current scenario is definitely mandatory. That is what I think. And currently, these reprocessors are very easily available and they're not very expensive either. They cost around 1 to 1.25 lakhs. In case somebody does not have an automatic reprocessor, manual disinfection should be done. It is very rigorous. Minimum 20 minutes, minutes of continuous flushing of all channels in this order. So that needs to be done, and that is very rigorous for any technician to do. What other cleaning materials do we use for surface cleaning? 0.1% hypochlorite or bacillol can be used. Linen and other washables should be cleaned with detergent and hot water. Washing should be done. And all contaminated disposables should be immersed in 1% hypochlorite before discarding. What about endoscopic accessories? Preferably, all accessories should be used as a disposable single use, particularly for confirmed COVID positive patients. And since we are going to be doing only emergency GI bleeds, using a band ligation or device or a needle as a single use is not too much of a difficulty. In case we have to use ERCP, we have to do an ERCP, then probably gas or plasma sterilization could be considered, but it is only as an inferior alternative. We have to remember that. And patient also has to understand that. Therefore, a separate informed consent for reuse is always mandatory. Otherwise, one can get into legal issues. Therefore, friends, this is just an overview so that we can generate more discussion. We need to understand that we have to have our own strategies to triage and assess the risks. But we must consider all procedures to be at high risk. Patient selection is important in a time-sensitive protocol, and judicious, but at the same time proper usage of PPE is important. Disinfection policy has to be enhanced, and resources can get compromised if the disease burden increases. So let us judiciously save but not waste. What is most important in the current scenario is not to fall prey to the patient's desire to undergo a procedure. Only if you feel that the patient really merits the endoscopy, and only if you feel that the patient's treatment plan can be changed dramatically by performing the procedure, then one should do it. Otherwise, we should reduce and judiciously refuse all procedures on these patients. We need to remember that 2020 will be remembered as a year of self-preservation. We all need to self-preserve, but I'm sure that 2021 will be a year of resurrection, and adversity will bring forth the best in all of us. We will do it. We will fight together. We will win over COVID-19. Thank you so much. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a really very illustrative presentation. Now, in this forum, Dr. Dixit, you can read out the questions, if any, by taking names of the questionnaire. Till the time, sir, I would like to ask one question, whether now in this COVID era, many of the procedures like polypectomy or some biopsy procedures or some of the procedures in which cautery is required, and what about the smoke which is generated during use of this cautery? Any extra precautions you have to take in such situations, sir?
See, madam, both these procedures that you have mentioned, polypectomy as well as biopsy, both these procedures are primarily elective procedures. We need to understand that. So unless the patient has significant severe bleeding because of a polyp, I would just tell the patient not to worry. He has a polyp which has been diagnosed, and we can definitely do it after a few months once the COVID risk has come down and the entire pandemic has been controlled, and there is no hurry to do it. That is the first thing. Now, suppose, for example, one of these patients does have a lot of bleeding and you feel that it is required, like a semi-emergency kind of a procedure. We need to understand that during endoscopy, the smoke that is generated is inside the patient, and we can suction it out, and it is going through a closed channel into the suction device.
Yes.
So the risk is relatively low. Of course, the patient can burp it out, they can pass it out, those things can be done. So we have to minimize the amount of insufflation that we are doing during the procedure.
Okay.
And also what we are doing is we are doing these procedures under anesthesia. So because of that, the chances that the patient will expel that smoke out is less.
Okay.
And we are all going to be using all the PPE. So the risk is less, of course, it remains.
Okay. Now, anything to add, sir, in the suction bottles, which are collecting all these secretions? Do you add any disinfectants within the suction bottles?
See, actually, if we are doing a surface cleaning and including the wash basins and the sinks and everything, then possibly it may not be mandatory to add something, but otherwise you can add hypochlorite solution in the suction bottles. There is no harm in that.
Yes, Dr. Dixit, you can read out the question and name.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I would like to request all the participants, if you have any question, you can write down in your comment box and then submit. Then only we can able to see your question. So just write down your question and submit it. Then only we can see in the comment box. So, ma'am, if you can have the question, because right now the question is not there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because I am not getting any questions, but I think the viewers have another link that you all have shared. No, it is not on the same platform.
Okay.
Yeah, now, but sir, they have the question box along with the
right.
Okay. Now, in this special COVID consent, sir. Now, yes, in these endoscopy procedures, what extra words you have added to the routine consent?
Madam, I think the COVID consent is practically the same for any patient who is coming to, the OPD or to the IPD. What we have to basically inform the patient is that the patient can develop COVID because he is coming into a high risk zone, because he is coming to a hospital. And yes, at the same time, the patient can contact COVID. At the same time, patient may be an asymptomatic carrier. Because of him, other people around him can also contact COVID. Now, the longer the patient stays in the hospital, the risk increases. So this is what we need to explain to the patient, and that they have understood this, and they will not hold the hospital or the healthcare, any of the healthcare workers, including the doctor, responsible for any of these occurrences. So it is the same thing. For the procedure, I don't think there is any particular additional, consent that we have to take. Only thing is, if we are doing a procedure that includes anesthesia, so there is an invasive element to the procedure that is happening, so which further increases the patient's risk. So that you have to add.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what about the if within a day we have planned 3 emergency procedures? What should be the ideal interval between the 2 cases, and what is the mode of disinfection in this interval?
Yeah. So, see, ideally it should be about 1 hour between 2 procedures, but the minimum should be at least 30 minutes.
Okay.
1 hour is ideal because the aerosol settles down within about 1 hour. And this I am talking about a non-suspect or a low-risk patient. If it is a high risk or a proven COVID patient, then a minimum of 3 hours is necessary, because we do not have a negative suction in a pressure room. So in a negative pressure room, about after 90 minutes or 120 minutes, you can take up the new patient. But in a non-negative suction pressure room, it should be 180 minutes. That is what they say. So a low risk patient or who is a negative patient, if we have 3 patients lined up, then you can do it after 1 hour each. or a minimum of 30 minutes. Surface cleaning between the procedure is the sheets need to be changed, and they have to be put for washing. The surfaces, all the surfaces should be cleaned with 0.1% hypochlorite solution, which includes the bed, the floor, the tabletops, the all these areas, and then the next patient is taken inside, because otherwise there is also a risk of patient to patient transmission. So that is important.
Okay, okay.
Sir, Dr. Shankar Velu has a question, that is the fumigation is useful, or what is the ideal solution means for the cleaning post procedure?
See, the post procedure, as I mentioned, either surface cleaning can be done with 0.1% hypochlorite solution or a bacillol solution. So either one of these solutions can be used. So all equipment like your Boyle's machine, your endoscope processor, and all these things should be cleaned with a bacillol solution. The floor and the bed rails and everything, other things can be cleaned with hypochlorite solution. And fumigation should be performed at the end of the day. Fumigation cannot be performed between the procedures after every procedure, but should definitely be performed at the end of the day.
He also added a question, Dr. Shankar, that can fan be used at that particular point of time, or means AC or the fan? That's what I understood, means during the procedure.
That, sir, in the modular OT, or where we have a positive pressure ventilation,
Yes.
What are the guidelines for that, sir?
Right. See, now if you have an air conditioner in your OT, the exhaust of the air conditioner should be opened so that outside air is going to get circulated and only the inside room does not get recirculated. That is very important. The other thing is, after every procedure, and that is what in fact I forgot, if preferably windows should be opened so that the air ventilation is, the air is ventilated and the air in the room is expelled out. And however, a fan is not recommended, because if you use a fan, then aerosolization during the procedure can increase tremendously, and that is not recommended. And the AC pressure should be the flow should be as minimum as possible. So maintain a ventilation, but there should not be a blast. There should not be a blast.
Okay. Okay. Now in colonoscopy procedure, sir, while we are doing suction, or whether we should do or try to avoid as much as possible. What is your say on this? Now in colonoscopy, while we are propagating through the bowel.
No, madam, colonoscopy suction is mandatory, because without doing suction, one will not be able to complete the colonoscopy, and in fact, the patient will get more distended, and then the patient will expel out the air or the CO2, which will be in an uncontrolled fashion. Rather than that, if suction is used judiciously, and if you minimize the insufflation of the colon, then the chances that the patient will expel out the gas suddenly is less likely.
Okay.
And your suction area is quite a closed area, so that is not going to have this problem. So suction is, you see, if you have a central suction, then the central suction will carry it outside the OT. If you don't have a central suction, and if you only have a suction machine, then probably what you can do is you can apply, put a viral filter to the suction outlet, and then probably discard the viral filter at the end of the day or something of that sort. That could be done, but you'll have to talk to the suction device manufacturer to see if some viral can be applied to over there. That is important. And you need to remember that all this aerosol, the PP is being used by all the participants in the room. So even if there is aerosol in the room, if we maintain, the distance between two procedures, the gap between the two procedures of about 1 hour, then this aerosol is going to settle down. Then the floor can be cleaned. See, the virus is a very labile virus, so there is no scare about the virus per se. It is just that it is very infectious. So if we take proper cleaning procedure, cleaning care, usually, there is very little risk of, anybody contacting, a fomite transmitted infection. So there is very little.
Dr. Sandeep has a question, that can we use HIV kit if PPE kits are not available? in a low risk
That is
group
exactly
of the
what I
patient.
mentioned. That is exactly what I mentioned. That HIV kits can definitely be used, and they are probably as good. Some additional things in addition to HIV kit, which I would like to recommend if somebody is you're wearing a HIV kit, is that HIV kit usually will not have a face shield. Of course, if you are not wearing spectacles like me, a goggle is probably good enough, but make sure that the goggle is completely clear, covering your eyes. But more than a goggle, I think a face shield is definitely a much more preferred device to be used as compared to a goggle. One can use a goggle along with a face shield. So face shield usually is not part of the HIV kit, so that has to be used extra. The second thing is a plastic apron over the HIV kit gown is mandatory, because that gown is only level 1 protection according to AMMI, categorization. So you need to wear a plastic apron along with that, which should be discarded after the procedure immediately along with your gloves.
Right.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Dr.
please.
Dixit.
Dr. Mohammed has a question that which is a better for insufflation during colonoscopy, air or CO2?
Always carbon dioxide. CO2, we have almost practically shifted over to carbon dioxide insufflation for all procedures, and this has been for the last 3 years or so, even before COVID came. So I think as endoscopists, COVID-19 also gives us a lot of opportunities. That is what I believe, to introspect into our own practices that we were following till yesterday and improve on these practices for better patient care. See, using carbon dioxide simplifies and makes the colonoscopy procedure much easier and much more comfortable for the patient. Even if you are using sedation, the sedation requirements are much less. Talk to your anesthetist, and they will tell you that patients require probably 10 or 20% of what the anesthetic dose that they will require if you're doing it with air as compared to if you're doing it with carbon dioxide. The other thing is that the safety profile is far better if we are using carbon dioxide. So even without the COVID scare, I think that this would be a good opportunity to shift over to carbon dioxide, and it does not add too much to the cost. The other important thing is, uh, when I mentioned about practices, is also regarding disposable instruments or consumable instruments, and single-use instruments, because at least biopsy forceps and biopsy forceps, if you buy them in bulk, you get them at very cheap prices, 400, 500 rupees. So these forceps are very difficult to be cleaned and reused in another patient. So definitely consider using new biopsy forceps for every patient. And also the third thing is, let us improve our endoscope disinfection policies, because I am sure and we all understand and must admit that they are far from being perfect as of today. And we need to improve those practices so that we prevent patient to patient transmission.
Now, sir, as you are working in a high risk zone, what
Yes.
personal precautions you have taken, or to have, or personal family members, they should not have a contamination? What personal precautions you take, sir, at your level and at familial level? And as
Interesting
you are
question,
working
madam.
in a very high risk zone, sir.
Yes, high risk zone, meaning as of today, we have 42 COVID positives admitted at Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, out of which about 12 are in the ICU.
Okay.
Dinanath, we have had 5 fatalities really because of COVID-19 so far in the last 1 month.
Okay.
Now, fortunately, madam, some things happen at the hospital level. So, Dinanath, if you all have been to Dinanath, you will know that Dinanath is housed in 3 buildings. So, the
Okay.
old building is the COVID building, has been designated as the COVID building, and we are working in the new building. So, practically, there is no contact between COVID patients and us on a day-to-day basis. So, from that point of view, we are quite protected. Of course, we do have to take rounds, and for if there is a reference from any of the COVID areas, then we have to go and see. There we will use complete PPE, and we will make sure that PPE is being used when we are even going to the patient's wards, or particularly in the ICU. And most of these consultations we also try and do on phone so that we avoid going for a physical visit. Now, regarding personal protection, I must admit that yes, I have started on HCQS prophylaxis, almost 4 weeks ago now, 3.5 weeks. But that is a personal matter. HCQS has not shown to have a definite role, but when the ICMR guidelines came in and we all decided that yes, if we can take it, we should take it. Only one suggestion and one recommendation about if somebody wants to start using HCQS, do your ECG before you take the first dose, and also repeat the ECG before your first or second, follow-up dose after 1 week, because QT prolongation can occur, particularly if you are elderly, particularly if you are a diabetic, particularly if you have any cardiac disease. So make sure that you remain safe. Otherwise, HCQS, we don't want problems because of you taking HCQS. So I am not recommended HCQS, and that is still a matter of personal policy. But in case somebody wants to use it, make sure that you take all due precautions before you use HCQS. The second thing is, madam, some basic precautions that we do is we have kept maybe 2 or 3 sets of dresses that we are using for going to the hospital and coming back, and we are using the same sets of dresses and we change them every day. The minute I go into the hospital, I will change into OT scrubs, our endoscopy scrubs, and I will do all my OPD, endoscopies, everything using the OT scrubs, and then come out. While coming out, I will change into my outside clothes and come home. When I come home, everybody, the door is kept open, and I will straight go to my room, go to the washroom and clean up, at least have a complete hand hygiene session completely, and then change into home clothes, put your outside clothes for washing, and then come out, and that is all that is required.
Okay.
Nothing more than that. Make sure that all the switches, and if you are staying in a building where there is an elevator, the lift buttons and everything are cleaned periodically using disinfectant solution or soap and water by the maintenance staff or somebody from one of the families who are taking care of the buildings. If you have somebody who are living in an apartment, these are the basic precautions that one has to use. I have stopped using a watch for the last 1 month. No watches, nothing in my hands. And just now also I am wearing a scrub which I use at home also. So,
Okay.
so that is what is important. Otherwise, regarding masks, we are using surgical masks if I am doing only OPDs. And if I'm doing a procedure, then I will use a N95 mask with full PPE.
Okay. Okay.
Right. In the, even in my consulting room, I have kept a pen over there. I have kept a pad over there. There is a disinfection, hand sanitizer bottle on my table. So everything remains there. I don't carry anything home. Only my mobile phone. And mobile phone, as soon as I come home, I will disinfect it. So at the place where we remove our shoes, there only. So I have stopped using shoes also, because you need to untie the laces. So I don't use shoes. I will use simple sandals which I can slip on and slip off. So minimum contact with your hands. So that is important. And a disinfectant or a hand sanitizer bottle is kept in that area only at home. So minute you come home, you use the sanitizer and then you enter the house.
Okay. So I think Dr. Dikshit,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
now we should wind up the session. So on behalf of ENTAS, thank you very much. And Dr. Amol Bape sir, thank you very much sir. शेवटी मला वाटतं याचा शेवट करताना एकच म्हणावं वाटतं की विषाणू येतील, विषाणू जातील. आता तेच आपले सोबती आहेत. किती दिवसाचे आहेत हे कोणी सांगू शकत नाही. फक्त त्यांची सोबत भयावह आहे आणि या भयापासूनच आपल्याला मुक्ती हवी आहे. हा रे ऑफ होप घेऊन थँक्यू व्हेरी मच सर फॉर illustrative presentation.
Thank you.
And I remember sir in 2005 when I have just passed the MS, I think Dr. M.Y. Bapai sir has given the K.C. Kharpure oration at Nanded Massicon.
Nanded Massicon. I was also there. I had also attended Nanded Massicon along with him. So I was there.
So now there are different challenges for the Pune team, I think, for the 2021. So
No
let's
problem.
have a day of hope, sir. Everything will go smooth and we will have a normal forum. So you can conclude, Dr. Dixit.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Amol, for the detailed presentation and the lucid explanation on this topic. And I also thank you, Dr. Anjali, for moderating the entire session. We also would like to thank to the all the clinicians for sparing your time and joining us for the online CME program. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you want to have any feedback on the or the suggestion, you can also write down for the next topic. Also, you can write down in the comment box. This is, I think, this is the end of the seminar, and thank you once again to everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe and stay well at home. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
ऐसा अरेंज करके हम आपको कॉल करेंगे।